In 1914, Europe went to war in a war that was supposed to end all wars. The soldiers expected to be home before Christmas 1914, but instead of that, it became before Christmas 1918 and millions of men never returned home. This here is a story of the Great War. In this video, you'll have World War I explained. Stay tuned for a summary of the First World War. A quick disclaimer, the First World War is an enormous broad conflict and one video can never do justice to it. This here is a broad summary of the First World War. In the previous video I explained what caused the First World War. If you haven't seen that video yet, go do it now. On the 28th of June 1914, Austria-Hungary invaded Serbia. Russia mobilized and Germany, allied with Austria-Hungary, declared war on Russia on August 1st. Now, on the 3rd of August, Germany declared war on France. The French, they had anticipated a new war with Germany since their defeat in 1871. They had a plan of war called Plan 17. It basically consisted of thrusting waves and waves of infantry into Alsace-Lorraine to smash through the German lines. In reality, only some German units were managed to stop the huge waves of French infantry by machine guns and artillery fire. In the meanwhile, Germany executed their plan of war, the von Schlieffen plan. Here they made a circular movement through Belgium, which was neutral, in order to capture the French capital of Paris. When the Germans marched through neutral Belgium, Britain declared war on Germany since it had guaranteed Belgian neutrality. Speed was for the Germans of the utmost importance because they needed to capture Paris before the Russians would be fully mobilized. When the German army crossed through Belgium, they burned down cities and towns, and over 6,000 Belgian civilians were murdered by the German forces. During the Battle of the Marne, the German advance was stopped by the French. Both parties tried to outflank each other, which became known as the race to the sea. Therefore, they dug themselves into trenches. The war of movement had come to an end, and the war of stalemate had begun. Artillery barrages, machine gun fire, barbed wire, and poison gas would claim many lives the following years. Life in trenches was hell alike. Apart from the danger, they were smelly, muddy, and full of rats. Several bloody offensives were undertaken to break the stalemate. In 1916, the Germans attacked Verdun. They wanted to bleed the French army white. The battle claimed over 800,000 casualties, and Verdun was not captured. In the same year, the British attacked Germans in their positions at the Somme. It became a bloodbath with over 1 million casualties, and there was no breakthrough. The Battle of Passchendaele, 1917, was yet another bloody affair with many casualties and no progress. The Eastern Front of the First World War was a different story. The Austro-Hungarians overall did very poorly and were driven back by the Russians in Galicia. However, the Russians were defeated and routed by the Germans at the Battle of Tannenberg. The Central Powers here were mostly on the winning side. In 1916, Romania joined the Allies but was defeated at the end of 1917. And this was because of the Russian Revolution. I get to that in a second. The Italians joined the war in 1915 at the side of the Allies, therefore switching sides since they previously belonged to the Triple Alliance with Germany and Austria-Hungary. From 1915 till 1917, the Italians fought in 12 battles at the Isonzo River against Austria-Hungary. During the Battle of Caporetto, the Central Powers pushed back the Italians. Italy remained at war and eventually signed an armistice with Austria-Hungary at the end of October 1918. Serbia was eventually overtaken by the Austro-Hungarians late 1915. The Serbians had managed to stand 1 year strong against the Austro-Hungarian onslaught. But with also German and Bulgarian forces against them, they had to evacuate through Montenegro and Albania. The war was continued from Greece alongside the British and the French. In 1918, Serbia was liberated. On Africa, there were several German colonies that were now surrounded by Allied colonies. These were Togo, Cameroon, Southwest Africa, and East Africa. Togo was captured very quickly. Cameroon took the Allies 1.5 years. Eventually, German Southwest Africa was also captured. And German East Africa, well, that became a bloody undertaking for the Allies since they were not suited to the terrain and made some vital mistakes. Eventually, the Germans would harass the Allies with guerrilla warfare till after the Armistice of 1918. Let's take a look at the Middle Eastern front of the First World War. The Caucasus is where the Russians and the Turkish clashed. The Turkish suffered horribly losses and had to retreat back into eastern Anatolia. The British launched an offensive from present-day Iraq. In April 1915, Australian and New Zealand forces landed at the Turkish peninsula of Gallipoli. They had to march to Istanbul. However, the Ottomans, they put up fierce resistance, and at the end of that year, the Allied forces were evacuated from the peninsula. At the same time, the Ottomans carried out a genocide against its Armenian population, an event in history that is controversial among Turkish people even till this very day. The British, they wanted to mobilize the Arabs inside the Ottoman Empire to fight against its rulers. And a key figure in this was T. Lawrence, that became known as Lawrence of Arabia, and eventually they would proclaim victory. The Asian and Pacific front of the First World War. Well, here there was the least fighting of the entire war. Germany had some colonies in the Pacific, and most of these Pacific islands fell into Allied hands without a single shot fired. Some skirmishes did take place on the German colony of what is now Papua New Guinea. The biggest battle was the Siege of Tsingtao. Tsingtao was a German colony on the Chinese mainland that came under siege by British and Japanese forces. After several months, the colony had to surrender. The German East Asia Squadron made its way through the Pacific and fought at Chile. Another battle at the end of 1914 was fought at the Falklands Islands, where they were defeated by the Allies. In 1917, something changed on the Eastern Front. The Russian army disintegrated, and at the end of that year, the radical Bolsheviks, the communists, they seized power in Russia. They signed a peace treaty with the Central Powers that became known as the Peace Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. Here, Soviet Russia had to cede over land to the Central Powers, the Baltics and the Ukraine. And Germans, they could now transfer troops from east to west. In 1917, the United States declared war on Germany. Already in 1915, German submarines had sunk the American passenger ship the Lusitania, which actually had guns aboard. The tipping point came because of the Zimmermann telegram. This was a German telegram that was sent to Mexico, where the Germans promised Mexico American land if they would help in a war against the United States. And thus, from 1917 onwards, more and more American troops arrived at the European mainland to fight against Germany. German high command knew it had to take action before it was too late, because also the Germans were suffering under a naval blockade, which caused severe food shortages inside Germany. Germany had to take action, and that's what they did in the spring of 1918 with the Spring Offensive, also known as the Kaiserschlacht. Here, they used stormtroopers to infiltrate enemy lines, and they made some territorial gains. However, the German troops were exhausted and soon pushed back by the Allies, and this kicked off the 100 Days Offensive. In August 1918, the Battle of Amiens took place, and this was called the Black Day of the German Army, according to German Army High Command. From this point on, it was all downhill. Bulgaria, which was also part of the Central Powers, signed an armistice in September 1918. The Ottoman Empire in October 1918. The Austria-Hungarians in November 1918. And so did Germany. Early November 1918, there was a mutiny of German sailors in the city of Kiel, which soon spread to the country. The German Kaiser Wilhelm II, he fled to the Netherlands, and a new German Social Democrat government signed the armistice of 11 November 1918. The First World War was over. Thanks to my patrons you see on screen, especially Michael Nosak, Henry Clarkson, Colin Castleman, and of course, the President. If you want to know more about the causes of the First World War, you click right here. If you want to know more about a very unknown theater of the First World War, the German East Africa campaign, you click right here. Thank you for watching. Do not forget to subscribe, and I see you later.